All right, take two. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
Absolutely. So we started a podcast and then we got cut off, so we're doing it again. So what I did say in the previous podcast was I'm excited to have you on because you're my top 5 all-time guests that I wanted to be on the show prior to me even having a show. So I appreciate you stopping by and jumping on the pod. So for people that don't know who you are, for people that have never heard of you, the few people that have never heard of you, tell people a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there. I have a whole stack of flashcard questions for you, so a lot to get into.
So I'm a double board certified psychiatrist. I'm an adult and child psychiatrist. Been doing that for about 40 years. I'm a brain imaging specialist. I have 10 clinics around the United States. We do a study called brain SPECT imaging that looks at blood flow and activity. We have a database. I think it's the world's largest database of about 200,000 scans. Our youngest patient is 9 months. Our oldest is 105. We've done like really cool research, award-winning research on professional football players, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder. Discover magazine listed our research in 2016 as one of the top 100 stories in science. That was pretty cool. I've also written many dozens of books about the brain. 12 of them have been New York Times bestsellers. And I've written and produced.
We have most of them here at the studio. So,
and I've written and produced 16 national public television specials that have aired about 130,000 times across North America. So whenever I go to the grocery store, people recognize me and they want to see what's in my basket.
That's a funny segue because I was literally going to ask you about routines and food and the role that food and routines play with cognitive function, processing, and overall mental stability. So let's just get right into that, okay? So for foods, first of all, before we get into like what to do or the how do foods affect your brain? Like how do some foods, increase your cognitive function? And then also how do some foods hinder your cognitive function? How important is your diet to cognitive function and mental health? And then what are the foods to avoid and what are the foods to implement?
So I have a new book coming out March 1st. Pretty happy about it, called You Happier. Americans are the unhappiest they've been since the Great Depression. And it's based on these 7, I call them the neuroscience secrets of happiness. It's like the secrets nobody's talking about. And secret number 4 is love food that loves you back, that you're in a relationship with food. And some foods help you feel good now, but not later, versus those foods that help you feel good now and later. And you just need to know the list. Like I did this huge program at Saddleback Church with Pastor Rick Warren and Dr. Mark Hyman called the Daniel Plan. And after I gave my first lecture, one of the pastor's wives told me later, she said, I told my husband I'd rather get Alzheimer's disease than give up sugar. And I looked at her and I'm like, did you date the bad boys in high school? Because that's a bad relationship. You're in love with someone, with something that is abusing you, that's addictive, that increases inflammation, that is basically void of nutrients that make you fat, depressed, and feeble-minded. And so when I think of, so what do you eat? Well, it starts with water because your brain is 80% water. The rest of your body is 70%. So water is just critical. High quality protein and fat at every meal because they'll help stabilize your blood sugar. And then smart carbohydrates. So carbs are not the enemy. Carbs, we used to demonize fat and now carbs are being demonized. And I'm like, but an orange is mostly carbs. And they're dumb carbs and they're smart carbs. So the dumb carbs are sugar and foods that quickly turn to sugar: bread, pasta, potatoes, rice, sugar. Smart carbs are low glycemic, high fiber carbs. So think blueberries or cherries or raspberries. And virtually all vegetables are loaded with low glycemic, high fiber carbs. And so, like a great salad with as many veggies as you can get, that's a great lunch, especially if you put some healthy protein on it as well.
Interesting.
One of the most interesting things I've looked at with happiness, there's actually a study that shows a linear correlation between the number of fruits and vegetables you eat a day and your level of happiness. And the more colorful the nutrients, the better. Now, of course, that does not mean Skittles or different colored M&Ms. No. And so I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting. There's no rule that you have to have breakfast. I end eating about 7, and then I don't eat again until 11 the next day. So that's pretty much my strategy, because when you do fasting like that, there's something called autophagy, where your brain actually can begin to clean up the trash that builds up throughout the day. But if you're always eating, it doesn't give your brain a break. And the beautiful thing about intermittent fasting is it stops nighttime eating. And when you eat before bed, you're higher risk for a stroke and for a heart attack, because it doesn't allow your blood pressure to drop. So normally when we go to bed, because we haven't eaten, our blood pressure dips, which protects us from a stroke and a heart attack. But if you're eating right before bed, you're called a non-dipper, and you're more likely to get into trouble.
Right. Yeah. I remember hearing Elon Musk when he was on Rogan. He said one of the worst things to do is eat before bed. Not to say that he's a doctor, but he's a pretty smart guy, relatively smart. Most people would identify him as a genius. And he said, yeah, it's one of the worst things that you can do. So okay, let's break that down. How many hours specifically before bed? Is it 4? Is it 3? Is it a half hour? And also, yes, you have an increase of heart attack and stroke. How does that impair your cognitive function by eating right before bed? And does it depend on what you're actually implementing into your diet? So if you're eating a bunch of red meat before bed versus you eat an apple or a banana, you're still eating before bed. But I feel that for me, when I eat a ton of meat, because like yesterday I went to Texas Day Brazil, a Brazilian steakhouse. We ate at like 9 o'clock. I ended up going to bed around 12:30. And this morning I could still taste the meat. So I know I didn't digest that, but I feel that if I would have ate an orange at 9 o'clock or a banana at 9 o'clock, it would have been much different than me eating tons and tons of lamb and, steak and all different types of beef. So does it depend on what you eat and what's the exact hours and then the sequence of it?
Well, yes, it depends on what you eat always. And I think if you can go 3 hours before bed, that would be ideal.
Okay.
So you just want to give your body a chance to digest so you can dream right. And dreaming is so important, or REM sleep is so important, because that's the sleep that's actually healing or rejuvenating.
Right. If you don't have like an Oura ring or something to track that, but you are dreaming, is that kind of like a self-analytical way of saying that you're getting REM sleep? Or those things? Okay. So if you are dreaming hard, you're in REM sleep, no matter what.
Well, absolutely.
Even if you're not testing yourself. Okay. Got that. Yeah.
The tests aren't as good as we would like them to be.
Right.
We're hoping over time that they'll become even more sophisticated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe you guys should come out with a new product. You guys have so many products. We'll get into that too. Okay. So the reason why I asked is because if you're eating meat prior to bed, or if you're eating dinner and you love eating steak, then maybe you should not eat meat 5 hours prior to bed, but you can eat other stuff 3 hours prior to bed. So that's kind of how my brain works, is like put it into like a systematic process. And a lot of our listeners think like that as well. And I think that would be a more safer bet to don't eat meat past 6 o'clock p.m., but you can eat fruit as long as it's 3 hours prior to bed. So if you go to bed at 11:30 or 12:30, you can eat meat at 6 p.m., but I wouldn't recommend eating meat past that, but you could still eat a banana. That's why I was asking.
So let's just talk for a second about red meat, because red meat's also been demonized.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on your ferritin level. Now, I'm not a fan of industrial raised meat for all sorts of reasons.
Yep.
They're often raised with antibiotics and hormones, and they're eating pesticide-laden feed. I think you really want to be thoughtful. Plus, the animals are often isolated and angry and anxious and depressed. And if they're angry, isolated, anxious and depressed, what humans and other animals, they produce a chemistry associated with being angry, isolated, anxious, and depressed. And you're actually consuming those chemicals as well. So I really like sustainable, humane ways of raising meat. Now, if you tend to have high ferritin levels like I do, just sort of what I inherited from my Middle Eastern origin, red meat's not great for you. Ferritin, which is a measure of iron storage, promotes aging when it's high. Now, when it's low, you can't sleep, you have ADD, and you're anxious. So I think everybody should measure their ferritin level. And if it's over 100 or 120, you probably shouldn't have much in the way of red meat. If it's 15, you have all the red meat you want, just make it healthy, sustainable, and humane meat.
Okay, so essentially you can get that done at like a LabCorp, any type of blood work, they can measure that.
Right. And, one of my guiding principles, I do imaging. We say you can't change what you don't measure, but I also do a whole lab panel on my patients, because your brain is an organ, like your heart is an organ. And if you have too much iron, that's bad for your brain. If your hormones are out of whack, well, that's bad for your brain. If you have high inflammatory markers or you have infections, that's bad for your brain. So I think testing for those things is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, testing, getting a baseline of anything is probably ideal for every situation. And then if you adjust things, where you started. A lot of these guys, especially the gym bros, they just wing it. And you can cause a lot of problems down the line, especially when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. You might not realize it when you're 20, but you're doing damage to your long-term self and longevity. So just something to be aware of. Always get tested. Always test where you are, establish a baseline and then go from there. You said water. You said your body is made up of 70% water, or your brain is made up of 70% water. When you wake up, would you recommend someone taking like a Celtic salt or, a pink Himalayan salt and sprinkling it in the water? I know Dr. Andrew Huberman, he talks about that now, how crucial putting Celtic salt in your water in the morning to stay hydrated. Because just because you're drinking water doesn't mean you're hydrated.
No, I actually like lemon and ginger in water in the morning. I haven't studied actually putting salt in the water and to see if that is helpful.
Makes a difference. Okay.
Yeah, but people who are dehydrated by just 2%, they're cognitively impaired. And so, and their spatial awareness is less. So every time I get on an airplane, I always feel like giving the pilot like a bottle of water. So his spatial orientation's good.
Absolutely. So you would take lemon and you said ginger,
Uh-huh.
and then that will make you hold on to the water and absorb more into the cell.
Yes, and it's energizing.
Okay, cool. Okay, so obviously water is very important, and then just drinking water in general is not good enough. You actually have to absorb the water. If you drink too much water in a short period of time, you actually become more dehydrated because you're just pissing the rest out. So you have to do it in increments, and then actually take in stuff like Celtic salt or ginger or lemon. Um, I talked to a couple of doctors prior, and they're like, "Yeah, people think just drinking water and drinking a ton of water. Oh, I got to get my half a gallon, and I'll drink a half a gallon of water and be good for the rest of the day." Well, you're actually not hydrated at all because your body can only absorb so much at, in a short time period. What would be your take on that?
Well, I think actually what's more important is be careful not to do things that dehydrate you
Mm,
without replacing it. So, for example, a lot of people start the day with coffee,
mm.
and caffeine is a diuretic. Like if I'm going to go on stage and speak, there's just no way I'm having any caffeine before I do that, because
Why is that?
I won't last an hour before I have to go to the bathroom. It dehydrates you. Alcohol dehydrates you.
Hmm.
So I think it's very important what you put in your body so that you stay hydrated.
Is it dehydrating you because it's just making you urinate more frequently, or there's other mechanisms dehydrating you as well?
It's making you urinate.
Okay, so that's the mechanism. Okay, gotcha. All right. Okay, so we have. So, what would be your top 3 to top 5 foods to implement, and then top 5 foods to avoid completely?
So when I think of the top 5 to implement every day, I have a cup of blueberries. And I like frozen blueberries. So for me, they're
Okay.
sort of like God's candy.
Mhm.
Um, every day, I have plant protein. I make a shake with
Mhm.
plant protein powder. Um, I love salmon for the omega-3 fatty acids, and nuts and seeds, especially pumpkin seeds, have been found to increase dopamine. And every night I make my family a brain healthy hot chocolate. So raw cacao, which is a superfood, with unsweetened organic almond milk,
Mhm.
and heat it up, put in a little bit of stevia. It just tastes amazing.
Okay, perfect. So we got that. Avoid obviously is like ice cream and fast food, processed food.
I'm trying to think of a surprising thing to avoid.
Yeah. What about like cooked
Gluten
vegetables?
free packaged foods. Because
Okay.
people see gluten free and they go, oh, healthy. But then when you actually read the ingredients, it's a
Hmm.
lie. It's not healthy at all. They're all high glycemic, low fiber, carbohydrate stuff. A lot of the health bars, uh, in my book, Your Brain is Always Listening, I talk about the scheming dragons, which are the societal influences that are really hurting you. And one of
Hmm.
the scheming dragons is the unhealthy health advocates. It's like they're asking you to do things that are just dumb
Right.
when you read the labels.
So with gluten free, correct me if I'm wrong. If you don't have a gluten intolerance, it doesn't matter.
You're wrong.
Okay.
100% of people who have gluten, it increases leaky gut syndrome.
Gotcha.
And there's just not a good reason to
Hmm.
eat it, except
Yeah.
it's everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And gluten mixed with stomach acid turns into something called gluteomorphins, which actually work on the heroin centers of your brain. Dairy is the same way. Casein mixed with stomach acid turns into caseomorphins. So now you can see why pizza is a food people crave, because they're like, oh yeah, I got to have my pizza, or oh yeah, I got to have my bread. Almost everybody who comes to amenclinics, if they're struggling with mental health challenges, I want them to do an elimination diet for a month. Just for a month, get rid of gluten, dairy, corn, soy, artificial dyes, and sweeteners for a month. You can't believe the number of people I just get people to do that. 30% of my patients feel better. And then we just add things back one at a time and see if you're sensitive to any of those. I have a patient now who's got a wicked autoimmune disorder, and her rheumatologist never talked to her about her diet. And she was totally eating crap all day long. And when I got her to do the elimination diet, so much less pain, brain fog lifted. And now she knows, she chooses sometimes to eat bad things. She knows she's going to pay for them. But now she has that connection in her head. What I eat is associated with how I think, with how I feel, and how I act.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, it matters with everything, is what you put in your body. Not to be cliche, but if you have a race car and you're putting low grade fuel versus high octane, which race car is going to run better? Is your car going to break down faster? Most likely. So,
I use that analogy with teenagers all the time. It sort of got twisted a little bit with electric cars, but I'm like, so what's your favorite car? And if it's not a Tesla, it's a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or Porsche. And I'm like, would you ever put salt in the gas tank? And they're like, well, of course not. Like, only if you were an idiot.
Right.
I'm like, well, aren't you worth more? Or another analogy I use is, if you had $1 million racehorse, would you ever feed it junk food? I mean, literally only if you were an idiot.
Chances are probably not.
And you are worth so much more.
No, that's incredible. More people need to hear that for sure. We need to cut that up in a soundbite and make that go viral, because that could actually help a lot of people if they just heard that metaphoric format of explaining it that way. Sometimes you have to look outside the box to see what's inside the box. So I do a ketogenic diet. I'm big on keto. People that listen to the show, they know I'm very, very, I'm a big advocate of keto. I was just at the Lightning game with Dr. Dom D'Agostino 2 days ago, and he's the one that put the keto diet in the mainstream. He was on Rogan and Ferris and all those giant podcasts. So for brain or cognitive function in the beginning of the day, I still have an 8. It's 3:00 here in Florida. So I'll probably eat around 5. I eat once or twice a day and I'm good. And I kind of fluctuate from keto to paleo, or you could say warrior diet. That's what I do. So for cognitive function, I'm super clear right now. There's no inflammation, nothing. Obviously, I don't eat carbs and I don't eat sugar. I eat very low carbs, and the carbs I do eat is from vegetables. The question I have about vegetables, and I've heard multiple experts say completely different things. With cooked and raw vegetables, I just like cooking meat and using fat and all the things. I hate cooking vegetables. So what I'll do is I'll literally get a bag from Trader Joe's and eat, like wash the kale. I'll get organic kale or organic spinach. I'll literally crush it up and shove it down my throat just so I can get my daily intake of vegetables. But then I've heard, well, you don't want to eat raw because of this. You want to cook them. And then some people are like, no, raw is more nutritious. From one of the leading experts, what would you say about cooked versus raw vegetables and how they interact with your body differently? And what's the optimal way to go about ingesting vegetables?
So if you're not sensitive to tomatoes, cooking them actually helps to release the nutrients at a higher level. I think for broccoli and cauliflower and kale and spinach, cooking them's not essential and may actually steal some of their nutrients. So I have a granddaughter with a wicked seizure disorder. When she was 5 months old, she had 160 seizures one day. I mean, it's just really a nightmare. and I got into a big fight. I fired her doctor because I wanted them to put her on a ketogenic diet, because in like 100 studies now, it decreases seizure frequency in children. And when we did that, her seizures literally went away. And so food matters. And the ketogenic diet is really great for some people, but it's a nightmare for other people. And in my book, You Happier, I talk about different brain types. And for the balance type, it's good. So there's 5 primary types: balance, spontaneous, that's my ADD group; persistence, my OCD-ish group; sensitive; and cautious, my anxious group. For the balance, spontaneous, and cautious people, ketogenic diets are great. But if you're a persistent person and you worry and you hold grudges, and if things don't go your way, a ketogenic diet will help you focus more on the things that bother you. And so I was on Rachel Ray's show once, and we were talking about brain types and food. And she said, I'm the persistent brain type. And when I went on a ketogenic diet, I became so mean. I wonder why my husband didn't leave me. And so what carbs do, and this is why they're addictive, is they raise serotonin in the brain. There's actually a book called Potatoes, Not Prozac, and how to use food to manipulate your mood. So if you tend to be sensitive or persistent, you have to, I think you have to like go more toward paleo and get more sweet potatoes or quinoa in your diet.
That's interesting, because I think I'm kind of that person, but I think I'm relatively nice.
And so if you're nice and you're not mean and you're not more irritable,
I'm not mean at all. I'm pretty.
If you're not more irritable on that diet, then it could work. So at some point we should actually look at your brain and go, I wonder how his brain works. And that's people can find out about their brain type. I have an online assessment called brainhealthassessment.com. It'll tell you which of the 16 brain types you are. So there's 5 primary types, and then there are combinations of types. So for example, if you grew up in an alcoholic home, really common, 30 million people grew up in an alcoholic home. They usually have type 6, which is sort of impulsive and compulsive at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't drink. I don't do any drugs. I'm not on any medications. It's all health. I do NADs. I do glutathione. I do those type of injections, like intramuscular injections and IVs, intravenous. But I don't drink. I never drank. Yeah, I never drank.
We could, if we saw your brain, it'd probably be pretty healthy. I did. We do a series on Instagram called Scan My Brain, and we just did Troy Gloss, the Anaheim Angel third baseman who was the MVP of the 2002 World Series. And I have his brain 2 months apart. So he was really bad to his brain with his behavior. And then he was really good. And you saw how much better it got. I was so happy for him.
Yeah. I think that, I'm always pretty optimistic. I'm always optimistic. I'm relatively nice 90% of the time. Obviously, I have my moments. We're humans. But I've always been like that as a kid. So I don't know if that's a genetic thing, or because even when I ate sugar, I was pretty nice, and I was fluctuating. So I don't know.
So happiness is like 40% genetic, 10% the environment, and 50% your habits. And so we have way more control over it than most people think.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate to do what I want. Like, I wake up every day happy and excited to work and excited to learn. I'm all about meta learning, and right now I'm learning 4 languages, and I love that. I have businesses that I've invested in that are systematically processed and down the line, and multiple streams of income. And I love building, and I love helping people as well. I love having experts like you on the show. So for me, I'm not waking up working at a warehouse. My boss is an asshole. Like, I don't have to deal with that. So maybe now I'm 30, maybe now in my life, if I had to deal with that, I might not be as happy. But I used to work those shitty jobs when I was in my teens and early 20s, and I was still happy. But I could see the 45-year-old guys that are working, driving the forklift, and they were always a bit snooty. So maybe it does depend on what area of your life you're actually in. But I would say that.
Well, it sounds like you're building your life and you're excited to build. So many people get trapped into jobs they don't really want to do, but because of other decisions they made, they feel trapped to do that. And I often think it's also because of the concussion they had when they were 14 playing football, and it just decreased their ability to make forward thinking decisions. Or my daughter just went away to college. She said half the kids at her university were vaping, which steals your neurons and wears out your pleasure centers. And so if you're not taking good care of your brain, then the decisions you make are not as good and you end up stuck.
And it's all theoretical, because even if you don't have anything, assuming you don't have a family, if you're a single guy or a single girl, even if you go to zero, you can always get back on the horse and create a new life. It might be harder with a family, but it's these cognitive blockades that are hindering you to do something because you're scared of the outcome. But if the outcome actually did occur, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you're single and you don't have to provide for someone. Much harder to say when you have a family.
I tell people, think about when you were 17. Could you have taken care of yourself? And for me, the answer is absolutely yes. And I always go, could I eat at Wendy's tomorrow? When I worry about being poor, and not the healthiest place to eat, but, I can get their chili and a baked potato. And no matter what happens today, I can eat at Wendy's tomorrow. That way, because too many people's minds, we live in a society of undisciplined minds. And you just have to turn on the news or scroll social media. You're like, oh my goodness. So secret number 5 in You Happier is master your mind and gain psychological distance from the noise in your head. I actually have people give their mind a name and develop a Department of Homeland Security. So you're really thoughtful about what you allow in your mind, and does it serve your goals or does it hurt your goals? Like principle number 7, I love so much: live each day based on clearly defined values, purpose, and goals. And so the question is, well, does it fit? Does my behavior fit? It's not what you should do or you shouldn't do. That's not helpful, right? God said you shouldn't go to the tree. The next scene, Adam and Eve are at the tree eating the fruit, getting kicked out of the garden. If God would have said, look, do you want her to wear clothes? And he's like, no, of course not. Said, you've never gone to the tree. So you have to know what you want and then go, okay, does my behavior get me what I want? But, I've been a psychiatrist for 40 years. Most of my patients have never asked themselves the question, what do I want, in a balanced way, right? They may say money, or they may go, oh, I want this job. No. What do you want in your relationships? What do you want in your work? What do you want in your money? What do you want for your physical health, for your emotional health, for your spiritual health? So I have all of my patients, we spend a whole session just writing it down and then post it where you can see it every day. And for example, if I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship with my wife, some of the things I think don't fit. So I shouldn't say everything that I think, because it doesn't get me what I want. Or if I like the banana split or the, deep dish pizza, it's but it doesn't get me what I want. And so I'm
funny
going toward what I want and away from what I don't want. And Drew Carey, the famous comedian who lost a whole bunch of weight and got super healthy. And I love what he said. He said, eating crappy food isn't a reward, it's a punishment. And I'm like, he's going to stay healthy because he understands on an emotional level that it's just not what he wants.
Yeah. For me, I started doing keto not for weight loss. I did it for brain inflammation and being cognitively at the 10 out of 10 highest level. And when I see pizza, I go, oh, yeah, I mean, sure, pizza tastes good, but what is it doing to my brain? What is it doing to my body? I'm literally paying money to be unhealthy and be dumber and be fat. Like,
I love that mindset.
It literally makes no sense. Like, I'm paying to get uglier. For people that are into their looks, I'm paying to get uglier. So I'm paying money for something that is going to make me less attractive. That makes zero sense, but everybody does it. And that's how I look at it. And that's what kept me on a straight path. I've been eating relatively clean for, I would say, since I was 20, 21. So it's been 9, 10 years. And every single time, if I ever, and I usually don't because I have a good routine, if I ever started to veer back, I would always think of brain inflammation and becoming dumber. And my whole life is catered and centered around intelligence and being a meta learner. So it makes zero sense. It's completely counterintuitive to eat a pizza or sugar. And that's what keeps me going. So now I'm used to it. But I could see someone that is like, stuffing ice cream sandwiches down their throat every night. Yeah, you're addicted because you feel great. But at the end of the day, it's just mouth pleasure. It's your brain playing tricks on you. It's not really what you want. It's what your brain's telling you what you want, your subconscious mind. And people need to break that barrier in order to have a better life. And you're one of the leading guys that actually puts it on a mainstream way, I guess you could say. But for someone that isn't disciplined, maybe because sometimes even disciplined people and smart people, they kind of get into, they fall off the track a little bit. And then they're like, wow, I never really asked myself what I want. I kind of just got sidetracked with social media and my job and my girlfriend or my boyfriend. And I forgot because I used to be so disciplined when I was 25 and now I'm 27 and I'm a completely different person. Why did I stop going going to the sauna? Why did I stop doing high intense cardio? Why did I stop doing this? I used to do that. Where was the miscommunication? Where was the disconnect? For someone that fell off the bandwagon and wants to get off immediately, what would be your 80-20 top protocols to implement today so they could get back on track and eventually implement those habits and be consistent with them?
Well, the thing that came to my mind is 3 simple things. Start every day with today is going to be a great day. And that way you get your mind going in the right direction. And as you go through your day, ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it? So I think brain health starts with brain envy. And that's where seeing your scan is so helpful. When I saw mine for the first time, I had scanned my mom the week before and she had a stunningly beautiful brain. And then when I scanned myself, so she was 60 and her brain looked like it was 37. And I was 37 and my brain looked like it was 60 because I played football and had meningitis twice when I was a young soldier and just had bad habits. And so I wanted her brain. So brain envy. And I'm like, oh, Freud was wrong. Penis envy is not the cause of anybody's problem. I've just not seen it once in 40 years. We have a foundation called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life Foundation. We make these T-shirts. On the front, it says Freud was wrong. And on the back, it says brain envy. Anyways, awesome. So as you go through your day, just go, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And then before you go to bed at night, go, what went well today? And put yourself to sleep by just reviewing your day, focused on looking for the cool things that happen that day. Too many people go to bed scrolling social media or playing games on their phone, and they're just not being intentional at all about their dreams and their sleep and so on.
Yeah, sleep is so important, and that's a good segue for my next thing is supplements. I know your company that you have has a whole host of brain supplements and healthy supplements. I went through your stuff, and you have quite the selection. A couple that stood out was low, very very low dose of lithium oronate, and obviously you're big on omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, and DHA. Um, what supplements, if somebody wants to be 10 out of 10, Bradley Cooper and Limitless, they want to maximize their brain, they've got the diet down pat, they kicked out all the BS stuff, they implemented all the healthy stuff, but now they want to take it to the next level and become that super physiological meta learner. What supplements are definitely like a necessity, like fish oil, I'm assuming, and then what are some of the more less, I guess you could say, studied supplements that you believe actually improve cognitive function that are sustainable?
Well, anything we make has been studied. You know, in our core values, science based is second. Our first core value is authenticity. We live the message. If you don't live the message, you suck as a messenger. So I'll just tell you what I take every day. I make this amazing shake every morning about 11 o'clock. I just had it. Protein powder. We make chocolate protein powder. They're plant protein powders. They're extremely low carb. There's no sugar. Most of the protein powders you get in the store are just loaded with crap. And for us, we call that a brand violation. It's, organic protein powder. And then I put in a scoop of Bright Minds powder. This is a very special concoction. I did the big NFL study and high levels of damage, but I put my NFL players on a specific supplement regimen and 80% showed improvement in as little as 2 months. Multiple vitamin, we make something called Neurovite Plus, brain and memory power boost that boosts your brain and memory in 6 different ways. And then omega-3 power. Well, people were complaining about the number of supplement pills they had to take a day or capsules. Yeah. And so I put it in a powder. And so
that's scoop, all that stuff is in one
except
formulation?
For the fish oil. All the Neurovite Plus and brain and memory power boost in one scoop. So I put that in the protein powder. And then I put in a scoop of smart mushrooms. So it's extract from 5 different mushrooms, including lion's mane and turkey tail and reishi and cordyceps. And then I put in a scoop of Neuro Greens. And I don't know why we call it greens. We should have called Neuro Rainbow because it's blues and reds and, it's extract from plants. And then I put in usually a cup of berries and then water, mix it up. And that's how I start my day. Oh, we make something called Neuro C, which is liposomal vitamin C. I usually put that in the bottom of the cups. I make this every morning for my wife. And that's how I take my, and then
that's awesome. Did you see?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I add to that Happy Saffron. I am a huge fan.
Saffron. I just took saffron before this podcast. I took the Spanish spice. I literally took it out and I had like a handful of it. Maybe I don't know if I'm taking too much, but I get a lot of it.
Probably not too much.
Okay.
The studies on it are stunning. There are 24 randomized controlled trials comparing 30 milligrams of saffron with antidepressants, shown to be equally effective. But saffron also has been shown to enhance memory and sexual functioning. And we released this in March of 2020. So pandemic, I had to shut down my clinic in New York for a couple of weeks. My dad died. And I'm like, all right, I'm taking Happy Saffron every day. And I will never miss it. I love that. It's also made with zinc and curcumin. Talk about decreasing inflammation in the brain. I'm a huge fan of curcumin. And then I take omega-3 fatty acids, extra vitamin D, because I want to keep my level around 80. I think that's
how many IUs do you take?
I take what's in Bright Minds powder, and then that's 2,000, and then I
Mhm.
take 5,000 more. So I take
Okay.
7,000 units a day. And then I take berberine, quercetin, and extra curcumin. And that's my regimen. We just released something called Calm My Brain that is the biggest launch we've ever had. It's got ashwagandha, theanine, and magnesium. Anxiety disorders double.
Which form of
During
magnesium? L-threonate or
It's
citrate?
actually it's L-threonate and glycinate.
Okay. Yeah.
So ones that are easily absorbed. A lot of people go to the health food store and get magnesium oxide, and it's just not very well absorbed.
No, I take magnesium L-threonate. I take the patented version Magtine. It was developed in MIT, and that one, I heard it on Andrew Huberman's podcast. He had a breath expert on, and then one of his colleagues that worked with him, he ended up going to MIT and working on Magtine. So they outsource and lease their patented magnesium L-threonate. But I've found that magnesium L-threonate is definitely the best form of magnesium. And I've taken them all, so definitely implement that. So you take all those things, so people can get that on your website.
brainmd.com.
Okay.
And I get so excited about finding natural ways to help mood, to help anxiety. And just during the pandemic, I sort of watched what sells. And our anxiety products, we have one called GABA Calming, everyday stress relief. One of my favorite products, I don't need it because I'm the Energizer Bunny, is Focus and Energy. It helps a lot of people. And then we have systems. We have Brain and Body Power. I think that's sort of the basic nutrients everybody should take. Multiple vitamin, fish oil, brain boost, and then Brain and Body Power Max. That was actually my NFL formula.
Brain and Body Max. Okay. Did you and the NFL players were scanned prior to taking these, and then within 3 months after you got tested from a lab, all legit, what were the increases that you saw by implementing these specific supplements?
So increases in blood flow to the front part of the brain, and that was often for them the part of the brain that was hurt. They had improvements in mood, in memory, in focus, motivation, and sleep. And when we tested them, we did a test called microcog, computerized cognitive test, dramatic increases. And it was so much fun to watch. And, like the first 20, everybody's got a better brain. And then all of a sudden, one of my guys, and he was actually one of the sponsors of my study, he was the president of the Los Angeles chapter of the NFL Players Association. His brain looked worse. And I'm like, what happened? Because that was irritating to me. And he decided to pick up marijuana in between his first and second scan. On social media, it's the most common question I get. And marijuana is just not good for your brain. It prematurely ages the brain. And, I don't have a dog in the fight. It's just been my experience is it makes your brain look older than you are.
And that's exactly why I never started this. Well, I never saw, first of all, for me, the idea of taking something and being more calm and less productive is like a nightmare. Like I get caffeine, I get all the other stuff, but for me to take something and be calmer, that for me, that makes no sense. But I get it if you want to like hang out and be more relaxed. But I would never smoke. But people always say that you're still inhaling smoke. If you're smoking marijuana, yes, I get it. It's not as bad as cigarettes, but you're still inhaling smoke, and there's still things that are going on that shouldn't be happening. What's your take on CBD?
I think the jury's still out. There are some studies showing that it decreases social anxiety. There are other studies that show it may have anti-seizure effects. In my mind, it's like, have you done the simpler things? Like, have you tried a ketogenic diet? Or do you know how to do diaphragmatic breathing? Have you been hypnotized? Do you meditate? Have you taken magnesium, theanine, ashwagandha, GABA? It's just the easy, hip answer. that just not smart. You know, I always want to think, am I doing something that helps me feel good now and later versus now, but not later? And also in my head, I always think skills, not just pills.
Yeah. Do you think there's any cognitive impairing factors of taking CBD, or you think you can take it? It might not do what you want it to do, but there's no downside to when it comes to like cognitive impairment.
No, I just don't know.
Okay.
And, you know, like magic mushrooms or microdosing mushrooms, it's another
Psilocybin.
really popular thing. And I just remember how excited people were when benzos first came out, or how excited people were when opiates came out. And, you know, the government actually pushed us to prescribe opiates. And, you know, cocaine was in the original version of Coca-Cola. I'm like, let's go for things that don't hurt you first.
Well, I saw that on your Instagram. So what about people that eat healthy and they don't drink, they don't smoke, but when they go out to a party or they go over a friend's house and they're ready to decompress and hang out, they drink a Diet Pepsi or a Diet Coke? Is that worse than just drinking a Coors Light or a shot of tequila?
No, I wouldn't say Diet Coke is worse than a shot of tequila, but it's not good for you. And all of the evidence with diet drinks are they increase diabetes and obesity.
What about cognitively? Any effect, or the jury's not out on cognitive impairment?
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I was 35, I had arthritis and I had trouble getting off the ground if I was playing with my kids. And then I had a patient come in my office and she said she got rid of aspartame and her pain went away. And I'm like, no way. And I think most of what I've learned, I've actually learned from my patients. And so I decided I was drinking like Diet Coke like it was my best friend. And so I decided to stop and my pain went away. And then I went and decided to test it and got like 32-ounce Diet Coke from Jack in the Box or some god awful place. And boy, did I hurt so much. And
did you have any withdrawals?
You are
not drinking?
cognitive. I didn't have any withdrawals.
Okay.
But I got withdrawal from the pain. But if you're in pain, you're cognitively impaired.
Physical pain.
If you're in physical pain, you're cognitively impaired.
So if your back hurts and you're like, man, my back is killing me, you're cognitively impaired as well. It's
You're
not just
gonna
physical.
because it's taken up room in your brain.
Interesting. Well, have you ever done, and I want to get into routines, obviously like sauna, cold plunge, all that, but have you ever done sensory deprivation tank and isolation float tanks? And if you have, or if you have studied it or know about it, what's your take on that?
You know, I haven't. So I guess I don't have a great take on it. I've had lots of friends do it and think it's really amazing, sort of like ice baths. I've had lots of friends do it. And I'm just a huge believer in not suffering. I grew up Roman Catholic. I went to Catholic school. And, you know, I sort of did long suffering. My first marriage was long suffering. I'm just not a fan of pain and suffering.
I got you. Okay, so that's awesome. We talked about food. We talked about sups, routines. You don't like pain, so I'm assuming you don't do cold plunge or high intense sauna. The float tank is.
I love.
Oh, okay. So you do
just
sauna.
Turn the camera around. I love being hot.
Okay.
So yeah,
so
I do a sauna a couple of times a week. The research on sauna is stunning.
What type of sauna though? Because some people do infrared and some people do hot sauna. I've done both, and I like the hot sauna better because you can tap into the heat shock proteins. But what's your take?
So I have an infrared sauna.
Okay.
But
clear light.
I think sweating is what you want to do. But also, as you said, tapping into the heat shock proteins is important, and maybe the healing mechanism behind it.
Okay, so routines. What routines?
Well,
you got your.
One of my favorite things to do is, I'm like always walking. So I like to walk, and I do my meetings that way. So I have a 40-minute huddle in the morning, and I live in Newport Beach. So I'm like going to Laguna
Beautiful.
Beach or Balboa Island, or I'm going someplace cool, and I'm doing the meetings while I'm walking. Plus, if you exercise, it increases serotonin. And so I'm nicer when I walk. And I'm always nice. I'm not an irritable person.
Well, you take the Saffron, so you have to be nice.
I'm more flexible. So if you deal with an oppositional partner or an oppositional employee or an oppositional child and you need to talk to them, take them on a long walk, and don't even bring up anything negative for the first 10 minutes. Let them get a little serotonin cooking in their brain.
That's interesting. So if you want to do a good business deal, say, hey, let's go on a walk, and you walk through nature, and then within about 15 minutes, you time it. Okay, good. So here's the deal, buddy.
And they're going to be more receptive because their brain's going to work just a little bit better if you're going to give them a good deal. They're not going to be more receptive if you're going to give them a bad deal, because they're going to actually be a little bit sharper. So, if you want to manipulate them, get them drunk.
Oh, man. Yeah, sign on the dotted line. Here's a shot of tequila. So, yeah, I heard that even looking at a picture of nature increases cognitive function. Is that true?
Well, it increases happiness. I'm not sure it increases cognitive function, but it increases happiness. And when you're happier, you generally think better.
Yeah. What's the correlation between high cognitive function, genius level Elon Musk, and just being happy? Because there's a lot of people that are geniuses and they're not the happiest people. What's the correlation with that?
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the people that are really smart aren't really happy. But Howard Gardner from Harvard had this really interesting concept of multiple intelligences. So you could be really smart in some things and really dumb in other things. And so, Elon Musk talks openly about having autism. And so really smart in business and creativity, but maybe not that smart when it comes to relationships. And if your relationships aren't healthy, you're not happy. Secret number 6 in You Happier is notice what you like about other people more than what you don't. That you're powerful, you're influential. And if you're making other people happy by noticing what you like I know exactly how to get my redheaded wife to yell at me. I clear in my head the pathway to hell. And I just don't go on it. I just what do I like about her today? And I say it, and I'm just more likely to get smiles and affection than I say the first stupid thing I think. And so, you can be a genius, your IQ, but sort of a dunce when it comes to either your physical health or your relationships. And that's why you're not happy. So people who have a high EQ, emotional intelligence, more likely to be happy.
Well, what if you have, so obviously IQ, like an Elon Musk or someone that's on the spectrum that is extremely smart, mathematically or logistically, they can work. I feel like it's easier for them to work on EQ versus someone that is, very persuasive, a good salesperson, and has high IQ or high EQ, but not I wouldn't say subpar IQ, but very average IQ, but high EQ, like the types of people that we see that are successful. If someone is not genetically gifted like an Elon Musk for IQ, but they have a good EQ, but they want to maximize their IQ, what is some stuff that actually has some science behind it that they can do that actually works to increase their IQ? Because I feel like there's so much research on how to become better at EQ and be a better person when it comes to emotional intelligence. But every time someone brings up IQ, they're like, it's genetics.
It's totally a combination of environment and genetics. So if you eat better, you're going to be smarter. One of my favorite strategies I learned from my friend Jim Carroll. He and I did a course together Jim Carroll's Memory Master course. I love it.
Awesome.
Exercise while you're learning. So if you're learning 4 languages, do it while you're on the bike, or
I'm
do
doing
it
it.
while
Oh
you're
my God.
walking, or do it while you're on the
Yes.
elliptical. Because what's happening is when you exercise, you're actually growing a part of your brain called your hippocampus. And if you then feed it information, hippocampus gets memory into long-term storage, gets what you're learning into long-term storage, and actually will grow your hippocampus, which, oh, by the way, is involved with mood and memory and spatial awareness. And so if you're doing new learning while you're exercising, that'll grow your IQ.
Yeah. So I have a whole stack of Mandarin flashcards that I wrote out, and I have like 4 different mechanisms of learning new languages, and I do these every night on the bike, low intensity, and go through them all. Some of them are new, completely new, and then some of them are ones that I've been seeing for weeks or months at that point. I have about 600 and something flashcards in there for the most common used words in every language, and I do it on the bike. Shout out to Tim Ferriss for letting me know that. Very low intensity though, because obviously if you're sprinting and you're trying to you're on the treadmill and you're sprinting as hard as you can and you're trying to learn all these different words and different symbols, you're going to be too stressed out because the physical requirements are too hard. So you would have to take it back and do very, very low, not even zone 2, maybe zone 1 cardio.
I would just say do it as you can.
Mm-hmm.
I know what Jim did is he just did it while he was on the bike. So rather than watching,
but he wasn't
television,
going
crazy.
He was going just a
nice,
steady.
I don't think he was going 10 miles an hour or something.
Yeah.
Nuts, right?
Does that work with visual only, or does that work with audio as well? What if you're listening to an audio book on the bike? Does it have the same science backing audio versus visual, or is it only visual?
Oh, no, I think it's audio as well. But if you're listening to a story, I mean, you're not really learning anything. If
right, like I have
you're
Michelle
trying
Thomas.
to repeat it back,
okay.
Right? I mean, if you're doing a language or you're doing a math course, it totally can be helpful.
Got you. Because I have one of my methods is Michelle Thomas, and it's all audio. So if I was doing the bike, listening to that would definitely improve the retention for short and long-term memory, which was actually going to be one of my questions. What would you say for verbal fluency increase? Like if you want to increase your verbal fluency, maybe it's someone that stutters a lot and they want to pick the best word. And sometimes when they go to think of what's the best word to use in this scenario, there's a block. There's some type of blockade. If you want to increase your verbal fluency and short-term, long-term memory, besides exercise, what would be your 80-20 rule on that? What's the most effective thing that science actually backs when it comes to verbal fluency and short and long-term memory?
I think it'd be singing. Try to sing them, because that may actually help your verbal fluency better, at least as you're trying to learn them. You're just activating different parts of your brain.
Interesting. Okay. With all the people, and you've analyzed tons of people at this point, celebrities, athletes, everyone, at this point in your career, what is the main reason why people succeed, and what is the main reason why people fail at getting back on track?
Well, I think it's trust in a new process is the reason they succeed, and they fail because of their habits that they continue and they justify, oh, I have to vape, or oh, I have to drink, or but if I get someone to trust me and they do the process like we talked about with Troy Gloss, it matters. Or I remember Justin Bieber came into my office, and I adore him. But like many celebrities, he'd go, he'd do what I said, he wouldn't do what I say. And when he was in a really dark place, he came into my office and he said, my brain is an organ like my heart is an organ. If you told me I had heart problems, I'd do everything you said. I'm going to do everything you say. And then he just got radically better. And
it's pretty good insight.
And I love that so much. Or Miley Cyrus, she and I did a Instagram live together at the beginning of the pandemic. And she fell in love with her brain. And it took time. If you look at her development, she just did NBC's New Year's Eve party, Miley's New Year's Eve party. I'm so proud of her. She just did amazing. But she stayed with the process over time. And, some people are ready for it and other people aren't. And you just try to be there for when they're ready.
I think people get excited in the beginning, right? Before it develops to a habit, you get excited. I think that's why having stakes, admitting that you're doing something to other people will keep you on track. Like Tim Ferriss talks about the DIS mechanism of learning something new, and the last S is stakes, and you have to develop stakes because that's going to keep you on track. Because I think a lot of people, when they start a diet or when they start to increase their cognitive function, it's fun, it's exciting, but then the butterflies and the glitter that goes away, and now it's okay, now I have to do this every day forever. So now it has to be formed into a habit,
and you have to love the habit. Right.
Yeah.
I want to love things that love me back. I've sort of figured out my relationship. I'm married to a woman I love who loves me back. I eat food I love that loves me back. I do new learning with things I love me back. And it's this relationship with life, and knowing that it's fleeting. It's, let's make the most of it. And so let's create this atmosphere of love and information. And so wherever in those 4 circles I talked about, my relationships, my work, and my physical, emotional, spiritual health, am I just doing things I love that love me back, that have meaning and purpose?
That's awesome. How big of like a brain game component plays a role in increasing your cognitive function, like reading, puzzles, playing Tetris? Because I heard when you're playing brain games, it's not the actual game, it's changing games and keeping your mind flexible and adaptable. But let's start with reading, right? If you're reading every night, are you going to be smarter than someone that doesn't read? Same person. You take 2 people, you clone them. One person reads every night, one person doesn't read. At the end of their life, I'm assuming the person that reads every night is going to be smarter if they were to take a test, a cognitive test.
It depends. I mean, the other person who's not reading may be, playing table tennis. And that'll actually make you smarter, probably smarter than reading, because it's activating your cerebellum, your prefrontal cortex, and your basal ganglia all at once. It's keeping your brain healthy, where reading may only be activating the left front side of your brain. Unless you're reading fantasy, it'll also activate the right side.
What would be your go-to brain games in that aspect if someone wanted to implement a couple?
Let me just say this, and I only have a couple more minutes before I have to run. Think that the brain has many different areas. And so just doing a crossword puzzle is like going to the gym, doing a right bicep curl, and then leaving, because it's just working out the language part of your brain. So you want to do word games, left, front side. You want to write, because that would be the right side of your brain if you're thinking creatively. You want to knit or do some coordination exercise. So for me, it's table tennis. I love table tennis. Or any sort of, people play racket sports, live longer than everybody else, like way longer than runners, longer than swimmers, longer than people play soccer or football. So racket sports, and now the popular one's pickleball. You want to just think of working out all of your brain. So language stuff, creative stuff, directional stuff, coordination things. And it's sort of like, when I worked out today, I worked out my abs, worked out my back, worked out my chest, worked out my upper back. You want to work out all of your brain.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate it. Well, guys, we as the Justin Caviar team and everyone listening, we appreciate you. We appreciate you jumping on. How do people get your book? How do they buy your supplements? What's the best way to reach out to you?
So You Happier comes out March 1st. If you go to youhappier.com, we have all sorts of cool free gifts, including a bottle of Happy Saffron. But you have to do it like right away. Mm-hmm. And you can learn about the clinics at amenclinics.com. Amen, like the last word in a prayer. And our supplements are at brainmd.com.
All right, guys. Well, you heard it here. All of the links and directions will be in the show notes below. Daniel, I appreciate your time. Any last words before you end this thing?
Just, I'm grateful to know you. You're just doing so many great things. If I was doing those when I was 30, I have no idea where I'd be today. But well. I'm amazed. And, any way I can be supportive, I'm there.
I appreciate you, man. I really do. And you coming on has definitely been, I can knock off one of my lifelong goals. So, all right, guys. Well, you heard it here, folks, from Dr. Amen to Justin Caviar. This is the Justin Caviar Show, and we're out. Bye-bye, y'all.